Hello, I'm Eric O'Dell with CA's Continuous Testing Live, and I'm joined by my colleague, Margaret Lee. She's the Senior Vice President for Continuous Delivery. Margaret, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, and we've been talking quite a bit about some of the shifts that we've seen in the testing industry lately, especially as you take a look at the Gartner's Magic Quadrant for software test automation, and they've also delivered a report about the critical capabilities of software test automation. Can you tell me about some of the shifts in testing that we're seeing at this time?
Yes, testing, or specifically continuous testing, that entire industry, our industry, is going through a lot of transitions. Foremost is driven by the type of applications our customers are building. Customers are building new applications rather than on a traditional monolithic architecture, sort of large waterfall process, into a microservices, container-based architecture. And in terms of process, teams are switching to agile, rapid development, rapid testing, rapid delivery model. In terms of deployment, these applications more and more frequently are being deployed into cloud or hybrid environments. So because of that, the tools that the developers and testers have been using for decades are no longer can support their needs. Whether they are highly sort of manual-oriented testing tools or testing tools predominantly supporting only on-prem deployments, customers are looking for something new. So because of that, the industry is evolving rapidly, as you can see from the plethora of products available on the market, and certainly that change is being reflected in the Gartner's analysis.
Now, if you take a look at the critical capabilities report for software test automation, we see some major shifts there. I mean, we're talking about removing or collapsing some of the use cases that were formerly there, and now we're seeing the rise of things like continuous testing for one, but also open source based testing.
Right.
And tell me a little bit about why you think that shift may have occurred.
Right. The most critical thing is the concept of being continuous. So if you are in an agile team developing and releasing an application, which is not really just one application, which is a collection of many microservices, you're in the business of continuously building, iterating, evolving those services, testing it, and putting to production. That requires your testing to keep up with that pace, right? So the testing have to go from requirements through the life cycle all the way to deployment, and you can argue with the shift to right, some of the monitoring essentially is testing production. So this new concept is evolving fast and really rapidly rising in customers' demand, because they very quickly realize the ability to validate the quality and the tests becomes a bottleneck for their agile and DevOps transformation. Now, separately, we mentioned things like API testing. APIs today are the application. Many applications are being accessed by other systems. For example, microservices are accessed by APIs. So APIs are the application. So no surprise, the prominence of testing those becomes more and more priority. Third is open source. Open source is an industry trend, right? There are many open source projects out there that leverages the community for IP, and particularly not surprisingly, in a domain that's developer using, developer heavy, you can have tools that come from the open source community, and many of the vendors such as CA would add value to those tools to help incorporate into the end-to-end continuous testing toolchain. So those sort of new categories that Gartners have identified really do reflect what's going on in the marketplace and what's going on as demanded by customers.
Right. So, okay, continuous testing is nothing new. I mean, it's been around for nearly a decade. But why are we only seeing it appear now? I mean, is there a slower adoption happening in the industry? What's happening there?
What people have thought they were doing continuous testing really is test automation, right? So test automation frameworks has been around for a while, and they've been evolving. And sometimes people would link test automation with some sort of continuous integration, continuous build tools such as Jenkins and et cetera. And they think, oh, at that point, you know, I can kick off automation automatically, so therefore I must have continuous. What continuous testing is a lot more than that. It starts from the moment a requirement is created, a user story is defined, and through the development cycle, validate it at unit level, at system level, validate for performance, validate it sometimes for security more and more these days, and go into production. And the world of development environment, testing environment, pre-production environment, and then production environment, sort of for monolithic applications, is people moving away from that. More and more people want to put services into even production environment directly. So now you have the span of continuous testing being expanded to from requirements all the way into monitoring in production. All are different aspects and different parts of continuous testing. And this really is a system, right? This is a highly automated system. You want to be able to get all of these kicked off automatically. And the automated test execution is certainly the key important part of this, the engine of this engine of continuous testing. But continuous testing is a lot more than that.
Now I want you to take a look behind you here. We have the continuous testing use case up there. You know, you're in charge of the strategy for products for our CD business unit. And you know, for the first time, CA has shown up in the critical capabilities report, but wow, we jumped right up to the top. We are number one in continuous testing. Talk to me about the product strategy and why you think that we've been just elevated to the top, even though we're first-time entry.
Thank you, Eric. We're very pleased, and obviously we're very proud of our placement in this year's Gartner Critical Capabilities. I think what we've done the last year, first is focus and investment, right? So we took a look at what does it mean to be agile? What does it mean to be DevOps? What are the actual tools and processes are needed to accomplish those sort of fairly sort of industry buzz sort of process and way of developing software? Right. What we have found is that, one, we needed to redefine. We spoke to a lot of customers, everybody from developers, testers, to people responsible for application delivery, to architects, to look at their current tool chain. What we find is that the definition of testing need to be expanded, and the definition of continuous testing almost have to be sort of thought about anew. So we put a focus on that. We invested in this tool chain, which we believe is critical backbone of developing in an agile manner. And in CA's lingo, we believe this is the backbone of customers' modern software factory. And then we went about it fairly systematically. We took assets we already had. We had a number one product in the market for service virtualization, and a highly regarded test data management tool, both of which accelerates people's test efficiency. We took that, we built additional components such as Agile Requirements Designer. Remember what I talked about early in the cycle. So from requirements into test creation, we invested in that and grew that product, and it's very well recognized, particularly in that space. We also launched our Continuous Delivery Director, which is the end-to-end management throughout the entire system, right? From Agile Central to Jira to collect requirements, working integrated with Agile requirements, to kicking off builds, to kicking off tests. And of course, we made significant investment in BlazeMeter acquisition, which gave us a SaaS-based performance testing engine. On top of that, very rapidly after BlazeMeter joined CA family, we released the Blaze API testing capabilities. So long and short of it is, we had a very clear vision. We had a very sort of execution-minded way of completing the portfolio. And looking ahead, we're not done. Looking ahead, we see, both opportunities in existing to help people test what they have already, whether it's packaged apps, whether it's big data, etc. We're also looking ahead into a cloud-based, completely SaaS-based testing platform. And of course, analytics is a big thing. Now that we have all these pieces, we have from requirements to test results to performance and test cases, it readies us to get into analytics and to learn about the patterns from what customers are trying to do, so they can be smarter in deciding when to test what. and to give the best quality results.
So Margaret, thank you very much for that analysis about continuous testing. Tell me a little bit, if I'm a DevOps professional and I take a look at Gartner's critical capabilities report for software test automation, what should I be looking at there and how should I be using this report?
Right, so if you're reading the report, obviously testing is on your mind, whether you are a developer, development manager, or coming from the testing function. What I would say is think about three things, and this is nothing new: people, process, and the tools and technologies that you have. In terms of people, what I meant was, how are you organized? Are you in agile teams? And are the testers and developers and business owners sitting side by side to lay out all the requirements, to think about either behavior-driven testing or test-driven testing, so get testing earlier and earlier into the life cycle. And the best way to do that is either move the people into those teams or at least have the virtual teams and get them talking. Second is process, right? So now that people are sitting side by side talking constantly, understanding what needs to be tested or what's important, then you think about the processes of building and testing and release, right? Do you run a continuous release cycle, or do you have some sort of weekly, monthly release cycle? And how does testing plays into that? And also, I would reach out if your company is not already running SREs, site reliability engineers, or DevOps sort of integration with the ops. I'll reach out to the ops teams as well to take a look at how your testing complete your view into the process testing code when just get committed all the way to features and capabilities in production, and that establish that feedback group to let you know exactly what customers are using, what are the risk areas. So that's a bit of a combination of people and process. And certainly your tools, right? So take a look at what you are using today, whether it's from a traditional vendor, what are the missing pieces? Do you have a forward-looking strategy of new applications? And certainly as a result of this, I would love to hear your thoughts, hear the customer's thoughts about CA's tools.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate all the insight that's going to help a lot of people with their continuous testing journey. And so I'm Eric Odell, and you've been watching Continuous Testing Live.
Thank you, Eric.